Let me present you a man named Gustavo Fring, the owner of Los Pollos Hermanos, a generous donor for all types of good causes, and a drug lord. This is his story. Ever since that fateful day, Gustavo Fring was a scarred man. He was never the same. The deep wound left by the death of his best friend morphed him into something else. No one had ever really challenged him intellectually like that. Friendship became a word synonymous with pain, misery, and death. And so, he never tried finding it again. His mind was focused on only one thing: revenge. Revenge and justice to those responsible for that day. Most notably, Don Eladio and Hector Salamanca. Gus knew that he wasn't ready yet. He knew that he needed to be patient, but that was okay. Patience is a virtue that he possessed in excess. After all, he had time. Yeah, he had time, until he didn't. Special agent of the DEA, Hank Shader, was getting an award for his heroic actions. The police department had organized a party for him and his family. They've also invited some prominent donors, one of which was Gustavo Fring. Gus didn't like those types of events, but he also had to keep his enemy close, so he accepted the invite reluctantly. After a long night of exchanging pleasantries, he was tired, and not just because of the event. Almost a week ago, a stupid kid had murdered in cold blood his best cook, the one who was supposed to usher his plan into action, a man named Gale Bettiker. Apparently, he was listening to loud music in his home when a neighbor's kid, mad at the loud music and stoned out of his mind, knocked on the door. Gale opened the handle, and a moment later, Gus had invested years into Gale Bettiker, and just like that, all the progress towards his plan was gone. While looking for a drink, he saw a man in his 50s who had a bit too many. He sat next to him, and they began talking. Walter White was supposed to have a bright future ahead of him. Instead, he ended up as a school chemistry teacher. He had a wife, Skylar White, with whom he hadn't slept with in years. He also had a son, Walt Jr., a teenager with a cerebral palsy. And on top of everything, Walt had just found out that he was about to become a father for a second time. The two men quickly found out how much alike they were. They started discussing all types of topics. The alcohol quickly untied the tongue of the uptight Gus, and the more they talked, the more they started liking each other. Gus was particularly interested when Walt started talking about his passion for chemistry. And of course, his midlife crisis, turning 50 and having a baby. How would Walt support his family now, with his measly $37,000 a year? At the end of the night, Gustavo and Walt agreed on having a dinner together the next day. The thing was, an idea was starting to form in Gustavo Fring's head. Something that would help him get his revenge and provide a bright future for Walt and his family. When he talked it over with his head of security, Mike Ehrmantraut, Mike was deeply opposed. It was madness. The potential for a disaster was monstrously high. But Gus didn't listen to him. If this was 5 years ago, or even 5 weeks ago, he would have heeded the warning. But now, he simply didn't have a choice. After a few meetings, Walt and Gus became true friends. Gustavo had finally found someone who had challenged his intellectual side. And Walter had found someone who was actually on his level. A friend who wouldn't betray him. The thing was, Walt had friends, really good friends. But they betrayed him and left a scar that simply refused to fade away. Walt was not angry that his friends were now billionaires and he was a school chemistry teacher. No, he was angry because he closed himself through all these years, not letting anyone in. And yet, somehow, Gus managed to heal this ugly scar in such a short time. Gustavo Fring decided that he would tell Walt the whole truth. He was diagnosed with a lung cancer. He didn't have much time left. Walt was devastated. After so many years, he had finally found someone to talk to, a real friend. But what came next surprised him even more. Now Gus needed to say it. He looked Walt into the eyes and told him the truth. Gustavo Fring was a jerkwart. At first, Walt laughed, thinking his friend was making a joke after revealing the truth about his health problem. But Gus didn't smile. He just kept staring. And Walt slowly realized that he was telling the truth. Gus told him about everything that happened up until this point, and even his true goal. He made him a business offer, and even told him that he can think about it, but not to take much time, because time was of the essence. Walt slowly nodded and left the house. When he came back home, a million different things were running through his mind. Should he call Hank and tell him everything? But what if Gus hurts his family? Should he run away with Skyward and Walt Jr.? Or maybe, well, he can take the offer. Maybe he can make enough money so that he and his family can finally live the good life, especially with another kid on the way. Maybe, just maybe, he can accept the offer. The next day, Walt called Gus and said two simple words: I'm in. And thus it began. Immediately Gus showed Walt his facility. Walt felt like he was in heaven. He was like a kid in a toy store. The plan went into full motion, and Walt began cooking. A few months flew by, and Walt was making more money than he knew what to do with. And his signature product became all the rave throughout the States. Which of course made Don Eladio jealous of Gus, and more importantly, his cook. And just like Gus planned, Don Eladio requested the famous cook from him. He wanted the new cook to come to Mexico and show how someone can make a pure product like that. Finally, Gus would have access to Don Eladio, something that he simply couldn't do before. His revenge will come sooner than his death. Walt showed the cooks of Don Eladio how to properly cook, and afterwards came time for the party. Gus and Walt were invited to the private estate of Don Eladio. Everyone was having a good time, drinking, partying. Gus walked in with a special bottle of champagne. He poured everyone a drink. The only one who refused was Walt, since he told them that he was a recovering alcoholic. Gus drank the liquid, showcasing that it didn't have any poison in it, and everyone cheered and then gobbled the alcohol. After 15 minutes, Gus went into the bathroom and puked all the champagne into the toilet. He came out to the sight of all of his enemies dropped on the floor because of the poison. The last one to go was Don Eladio. After so many years, his biggest enemy was dead. Unfortunately for Gus, things weren't over. He and Walt needed to run away under the fiery outrage of the guards. They managed to escape, but the body of Gus simply wasn't able to withstand all of this stress. The end was near. Gus had prepared doctors on standby, and they did everything they could. But it was simply not enough. Gus was dying. He looked Walt into the eyes and thanked him for everything. Walt thanked him as well. Lastly, Gus told Mike that he wanted him as his successor, and Mike accepted. The man who gave the order for the death of his friend was dead. The one who killed his friend, however, was still alive, with his last breath. Gus entrusted to Mike to take care of Hector Salamanca. Gus closed his eyes and saw the face of his friend for the last time, because where he was going was not a nice place. A place when soon he would meet Don Eladio as well as Hector. When they returned from Mexico, Mike sent his best man to take care of Hector Salamanca, a visit that ended up gruesomely. Afterwards, he began growing his empire. In the next few weeks, Walt showed everything he knew to a young guy named Victor, who became the new cook for Mike. For all his troubles, Walt had made $10 million. Not bad for a schoolteacher. Walter White quit his job, bought a car wash, and began laundering his money. For him, it was over. His kids would have everything they need. His wife would finally respect him. Walt was now ready to try and find new friends, real friends, and it was all thanks to one man. A man who managed to heal his heart. A man named Gustavo Fring.